It is the spring of 2022, and a charter captain on Lake Ontario hauls a brown trout up out of the dark water, and the fish is not alone. Something is fastened to its side, pale, eel-shaped, wet, gripping the trout the way a hand grips a rail. There is more than one. They ride the fish up into the light, mouths locked to the skin, and they do not let go. This captain has worked this lake for years. He has not seen this, not like this, not in a long time. And out across the other 4 lakes in the same season, the same thing is happening to more fish than anyone can count. Something is draining the Great Lakes from below, and the thing doing it was supposed to have been beaten more than 60 years ago. So this is the question that hangs over 5 lakes and a $5 billion fishery. What is emptying the largest body of fresh water on the surface of the earth? And how is it something that was here before the dinosaurs? Something that has no jaw? Something that people spent half a century and hundreds of millions of dollars to erase and never could? The creature on that trout is a sea lamprey. If you have never seen one, the mouth is the part you will not forget. There is no jaw. There is a round sucking disc, a wet ring, and inside that ring, rows of hooked teeth turning inward. More than 100 of them, and at the center a tongue like a rasp. The lamprey does not bite the way you picture biting. It fastens. It seals its mouth at the flank of a living fish, and the tongue goes to work, filing through the scales and the skin until the blood comes, and then it drinks. It stays fastened for hours, for days. It rides the fish while the fish swims, and the fish grows weaker. And one lamprey, over its feeding life, will kill about 40 pounds of other fish before it is done. And before it is ever a parasite, it is something stranger. A sea lamprey begins life as an egg in a river, one of about 100,000 that a single female lays before she dies. What hatches is not a hunter. It is a blind, worm-like larva, and it does not swim out to fasten onto anything. It burrows down into the soft sediment of the stream bed and stays there, buried in the dark, filtering food out of the water, for years. 3 years. 6 years. Longer in some places. Only when it is ready does it change, grow the disc and the teeth and the eyes, and leave the mud for the open lake to begin the part of its life that kills. Hold on to that buried stage. It is going to matter more than almost anything else in this story. Here is the part that should not be possible. This animal is older than almost anything you can name. The sea lamprey has been on this planet, essentially unchanged, for more than 340 million years. It is older than the dinosaurs. It is older than trees. It swam through at least 4 mass extinctions, the great dyings that erased most of the life on Earth each time, and it came out the other side of every one of them still shaped the way it is shaped now. It has no jaw because it comes from a time before jaws. It has no bone, only cartilage. It is one of the oldest living things you will ever look at. A survivor from a world with no grass and no flowers and no us. And it is currently outcompeting the top predators of 5 modern lakes. Because that is the reversal underneath this whole story. When you think of the Great Lakes, you think of the fish at the top, the lake trout, the Chinook and coho salmon, the big cold water hunters. Those are the animals we imagine as the top of the chain, the ones the whole fishery is built on. And this thing, this jawless leftover from before the age of fish as we know them, treats them as food. It fastens to the apex and drains it. The hunters are the prey. And that is the impossible part. The sea lamprey is not just deadly, it is the oldest, the simplest, the most primitive thing in the water. And it is sitting on top of everything we think of as the top. And it should never have been here at all. The sea lamprey is not from the Great Lakes. It is an ocean animal, native to the Atlantic, to the coasts of eastern North America and western Europe. In the ocean, it is not a catastrophe. The fish it evolved alongside out there have millions of years of shared history with it, defenses, tolerances, a rough balance. In saltwater, it is a parasite, not a plague. It was never supposed to be in the middle of a continent, draining freshwater lakes that had never met anything like it. It got in because we built the door. The first sea lamprey was documented in Lake Ontario in 1835. For a long time, that was as far inland as it could go, because Niagara Falls stood in the way, a wall of falling water no fish could climb. But people wanted ships to move past the falls, so people built a canal around them. The Welland Canal, cut to connect Lake Ontario to Lake Erie, opened the way. The engineers who dug it were thinking about grain and iron and commerce. They were not thinking about a parasite. But once the canal was through, the lamprey followed the ships, one lake to the next. It reached Lake Erie, then Lake Huron, then Lake Michigan, moving deeper into the continent through the 1920s and 30s, and last of all it reached Lake Superior, the biggest and coldest and cleanest of them, the one that felt safest of all. By the early 1940s it was in every one of the five. Within a few short decades it was everywhere, in a system that had never had a defense against it. What happened next is one of the worst ecological collapses in the history of North America, and it happened almost silently, underwater, where no one had to watch. The lake trout fishery of the upper Great Lakes had been one of the great fisheries of the world. Before the lamprey, it produced something on the order of 15 million pounds of trout a year. Then the lampreys arrived, and there was no natural check on them, no predator, no evolved resistance in the fish, and they multiplied. Every female laying her 100,000 eggs and almost nothing eating them back down. These animals fastened onto the trout, and the whitefish, and the sturgeon, and drank. And most fish a lamprey latches onto do not survive it. At the peak, sea lampreys were killing more than 100 million pounds of Great Lakes fish every single year. That was 5 times the entire commercial catch. The lake trout harvest fell from 15 million pounds to about 300,000. Roughly 2% of what it had been. A near total collapse. And here's the human piece of it, the part that matters as much as the fish. Almost no one saw it happen. It happened below the surface of lakes that, from a boat, from a beach, from a lakeside town, looked exactly the way they had always looked. Calm, familiar, safe. The water did not change color. The horizon did not change. The catastrophe was total, and it was invisible because a lake trains the people who live beside it to trust the surface, and the surface said nothing was wrong. Tens of thousands of jobs went, a way of life along those shorelines went with them. And you could have stood on the dock through the whole thing and seen only a pretty lake. That is the shape of this story. Not the danger, the invisibility of the danger. And that is worth holding on to because it is going to matter again at the end. But before we get to how people fought back, step out of the lakes for a moment, because there is one more thing about this animal that almost nobody living beside the Great Lakes knows, and it turns the whole picture strange. In the ocean it came from, the sea lamprey is not a plague at all. It is a species in trouble. Along the Atlantic coasts of Europe and North America, in the rivers where it is native, the sea lamprey is in decline, and across much of Europe it is a protected animal, written into conservation law, listed as near threatened, and in some countries endangered, its numbers falling from dams and pollution, and lost spawning grounds and warming water. The same creature that crews here pour chemicals into 200 streams to suppress is the creature that biologists in France and Portugal and Sweden are working to save. And for most of its long history, it was not a horror to people at all. People ate it. In medieval Europe, it was a delicacy, a dish fit for kings, and according to the old chronicles, King Henry I of England died in 1135 after eating too many of them. A surfeit of lampreys, the story goes. So the sea lamprey is not a monster, whatever the mouth looks like. It is an animal doing what it has done for hundreds of millions of years in the only way it knows. It became a catastrophe here for one reason. A canal dropped it into water that had never met it and could not answer it. The lamprey did nothing in the Great Lakes that it had not been doing for ages. We are the ones who opened the door and then trusted a calm surface that hid what came through it. Now, faced with a collapse like that, people fought back, and what they built is genuinely one of the great success stories in the whole history of fighting invasive species. So let me tell you how they won. Because the way they won is exactly what makes the rest of this so unsettling. In the 1950s, the United States and Canada created something called the Great Lakes Fishery Commission, a joint body, 2 countries pooling their effort against one animal. And in 1958, the Commission launched a coordinated control program that is still running today, more than 60 years later, without a break. The center of it is a chemical. At a small research station on the shore of Lake Huron, a place called Hammond Bay in northern Michigan, scientists worked through the late 1950s testing chemical after chemical, more than 6,000 of them, looking for one that would kill lamprey and leave everything else in the water alone. They found it on the 5,209th try. It is called TFM, a lampricide, and it has a strange, specific gift. Remember those blind larvae buried in the mud of the streams for years before they ever become hunters? That buried stage is the weak point, and TFM is the key that fits it. Applied to those streams in careful, measured doses, it kills the larvae in the sediment while barely touching the trout, the insects, the frogs, the other life sharing the water. It targets the one thing. Alongside the chemical, the commission built the rest of a machine, and some of it is stranger than the chemical. They put more than 50 barriers across tributaries to stop the adults from swimming upstream to spawn. They ran traps in dozens of streams. They caught adult males, sterilized them, and released them back into the rivers to court females and fertilize nothing, so that a female's 100,000 eggs came to nothing at all. They studied the faint scent trails the lampreys follow upstream in the dark, the pheromones, trying to turn the animal's own chemistry into a lure. And all of it costs money, somewhere between $15 and $20 million every year, spent every year, with no year ever taken off. Across more than 200 streams around the basin, year after year after year. And it worked. It worked better than almost anyone dared hope. Over the decades, the control program drove sea lamprey numbers down by about 90 to 95% across the Great Lakes. The trout came back, the salmon came back, the fishery came back, and today it is worth more than $5 billion a year and supports the region around all 5 lakes. Scientists who work on invasive species will tell you there is no other case anywhere on the planet where a species this destructive, spread this widely, was brought this far under control with a method this clean. For more than half a century, that was the story. We had a monster in the lakes, and we beat it, and we kept beating it, quietly, every summer, and the lakes were safe. That was the explanation that held for 60 years. And if you are finding this as strange and as compelling as I do, this is a good moment to subscribe, because the whole reason this channel exists is to follow these stories to the place where the clean version stops working. This one is about to. Because there is a crack in that victory, and it is a crack that was always there, and it took a global emergency to show it to us. The control program has one property that nobody liked to say out loud. It never ended. There was no year where the commission declared the war over and went home. Every single year, crews had to go back out to those 200 streams and treat them again, because the lamprey were never gone. They were held down, suppressed, pushed to that 10% and kept there by constant, relentless, unbroken effort. The 95% reduction was not a finish line. It was a hand holding a door shut against something on the other side that never stopped pushing. And nobody knew, not really, what would happen if that hand ever let go, because in 60 years it never had. Then, in 2020, it did. When the pandemic hit, the border between the United States and Canada closed, and travel restrictions came down hard, and the lamprey control crews, many of them based in Michigan and Ontario, and dependent on crossing that border to reach the streams, could not do their work. In 2020 and 2021, the treatment stopped or were cut back sharply on all 5 lakes. On Lake Ontario, the worst case, the tributaries received not a single lampricide treatment in 2020 and only about half the usual effort the year after. Elsewhere, crews managed less than half of a normal season at best. For the first time in more than 60 years, the hand came off the door. And that, as terrible as it was, handed scientists something they had wanted for decades and could never ethically create. A test. No one would ever be allowed to deliberately stop protecting 5 lakes and a $5 billion fishery just to see what happened. The pandemic did it for them, by accident, on a continental scale. So the whole basin became an experiment nobody chose, with a single question written under it. After 60 years of pressure, was the sea lamprey still the same animal that had collapsed these lakes once already? Only waiting? Or had all those decades of control quietly won something permanent? The lakes were about to answer. And here's where the lamprey's zone biology turns into a trap sprung in slow motion. Remember, the larvae sit buried in the stream beds for years before they transform. So the treatments missed in 2020 did not show up as a disaster in 2020. The survivors, and there were a great many of them, stayed buried, growing, and then in 2022, they transformed and swam out into the lakes to hunt, all at once, a 2-year fuse. The damage from the pause did not arrive until the pause was over. When it arrived, the numbers were staggering. In Lake Ontario, the lake that lost its treatment entirely, the sea lamprey population increased roughly tenfold, 10 times. On the Chinook and coho salmon in that lake, the rate of lamprey wounding, the fish coming up scarred and drained the way that Captain's trout came up, also jumped more than tenfold. And it was not only Ontario. By 2024, across the whole basin, adult sea lamprey numbers were counted at more than 8,600 above the pre-pandemic average, and all 5 Great Lakes were sitting above their target populations, with Lake Superior and Ontario surging the hardest. A team of 15 scientists from 6 different agencies studied what had happened and published it in 2025 in the journal Fisheries, and their conclusion was blunt. The lead author put it in one image that I cannot get out of my head. He said that, like a coiled spring, the sea lamprey population bounced back the moment the pressure came off. A coiled spring. That is what had been sitting under the surface of those calm lakes the whole time. Compressed, never defeated, only pressed down. 60 years of control had not made the lampreys weak. It had only held them down, and the instant the effort slipped, for barely 2 seasons, the thing sprang back with all the force that had been waiting in it. That is the reversal. For half a century, we believed the story was, we beat the lamprey. The truth the pandemic exposed is that we never beat it. We are holding it. And the difference between those 2 words is the whole difference between a war that is over and a war that can never end. I want to ask you something here, and I mean it. If you live along these lakes, or you fish them, or you grew up on one of them, tell me in the comments where you are watching from, and whether you have ever pulled up a fish with those pale marks on it. Because the people on the water see this before the studies do, and I read every one of those comments. So where does that leave us? If the lamprey cannot be beaten, only held, then the honest questions are not comfortable ones, and I want to walk through the 3 that keep the people who work on this up at night. The first is the simplest and the heaviest. It means the effort can never stop. Not next year, not in 50 years, not ever, unless something entirely new is found. The $5 billion fishery, the trout, the salmon, the whole living system of the upper lakes, now rests permanently on crews going out to 200 streams every summer and pouring in a chemical forever. The pandemic was the test of what happens if that lapses for even 2 years. And the answer was a tenfold rebound in the largest lake it touched. The lakes are not cured. They are on life support, and someone has to keep paying for the machine, and keep the border open, and keep the crews trained, every year, with no end date, in a way most people living beside the water have no idea is happening. The second question is harder, because it is about what we do not know. 60 years of near-total control taught the scientists a great deal about suppressing the lamprey, but the pause taught them something they had never been able to measure, which is exactly how fast and how far it comes back, and whether every rebound looks the same. Lake Ontario went up tenfold. Other lakes reacted differently. The system does not respond the same way everywhere, and the truth is that we only ran this experiment once, by accident, and we do not fully understand the animal's ceiling. Nobody truly knows how high the numbers would have climbed if the pause had lasted a 3rd year, or a 4th. And the 3rd is the one nobody controls. The pandemic was a single, unplanned interruption, and it revealed how fragile the whole arrangement is. But interruptions are not rare. A budget cut is an interruption. A political fight over an international commission is an interruption. A future emergency we cannot picture yet is an interruption. And the climate of the lakes themselves is shifting, warming, changing the timing of the streams the lamprey breed in ways that could alter the fight in either direction. The control has held for 60 years because the effort was unbroken. The pandemic proved the effort can break, And the thing on the other side of the door has 340 million years of patience and does not need us to make a mistake more than once. The good news, and it is real, is that the crews went back to work. The treatments resumed. By the most recent reports, the adult numbers are coming back down toward where they were before the pause, and the tide is turning again. The people who do this are extraordinary at it, and they caught the surge, and they are pushing it back down. But notice the shape of even the good news. Winning here does not mean the enemy is gone. It means the hand is back on the door, and the thing on the other side is still pushing. That is the best case. That is what winning looks like now. Holding. So here at the end is what this story is really about, and it is not the mouth, and it is not the teeth, and it is not fear. It is about what a calm surface hides and what it costs to keep looking. The Great Lakes are some of the most familiar water in the world. People sail them and swim in them and build their whole lives along their shores. And the surface tells them every single day that everything is fine. It told them that during the first collapse, when the trout were vanishing by the tens of millions of pounds and the dock still looked like a postcard. It is telling them that now, while the oldest predator in the water sits coiled a few feet down, held back only by an effort most of them will never see. The lamprey does not hide. It has never hidden. It has been doing exactly this, in exactly this way, since before there were trees to shade the rivers it breeds in. We are the ones who look at the bright, flat water and decide there is nothing under it. Right now, out in the cold dark of Lake Superior, lake trout are hunting the way they have for 10,000 years. Chinook salmon are running the currents of Lake Ontario. And under all of it, in the mud of 200 streams that feed those lakes, the larvae of an animal older than the dinosaurs are buried in the dark, blind, growing, doing the one thing they have always done better than anything else alive: waiting. If you like this video, YouTube also thinks you're going to like this one on your screen right now. Go ahead and click it.